Hello everyone, today we will know about the body fluids and the circulation. So now what is the circulation? Obviously some materials that must be the circulate. So which materials circulate? Actually that is called as the body fluids. Now what are the body fluids? That means simply the fluids that is present inside our body is called as the body fluids. So now what are the different types of the fluids are present inside our body? There are the two types of the fluids that are present inside our body. One is called as the blood, then another is called as the lymph. So now why this blood and the lymph, that is called as the body fluids, now they need to circulate. So that is very important. Just imagine when we eat or after taking the diet, obviously the food will go to the stomach or the intestine. So in the stomach and the intestine, obviously they will digest. So after the digestion, now imagine, because in our body there are the many organs or the many tissues. For example, besides the stomach and the intestine, there are the different types of the organs. For example, there are the lungs, there are the kidney, there are the liver. So now they also wants to the nutrients. That means after the digestion, obviously the glucose or the amino acids or the fatty acids, they are the form, that is the simplest form from the complex. So now this simplex form, that means the nutrients like the glucose, amino acid, how would they go to the different parts of our body? Now actually after the digestion, obviously now it is present inside our belly, that means inside our stomach and the intestine. So from the intestine, how would it go to the lungs, how would it go to the kidney, how would it go to the liver or different parts of the body, because there is no connection. Now the connection is the blood, because the circulation of the blood, and with the circulation of the blood, the nutrients also transported through the blood, and now through the blood it will go to the different parts of the body, like from the intestine it would go to the kidney, it would go to the liver, it would go to the lungs. So that is the most important function of the circulation, and that is the necessary, and that's why the circulation is necessary for our body, because for our energy, obviously besides the nutrition, another main important thing is the oxygen is also needed. So just imagine after inhalation, obviously the oxygen will go to the lungs. So now from the lungs, how this oxygen will go to the different parts of our body or different tissues of our body, because in different parts of the body or many organs like the kidneys, lungs, they also want the oxygen. So now from the lungs, how this oxygen will go to the stomach or the liver or the kidney. So now this is also by the circulation of the blood, and with the circulation of blood, the oxygen will also dissolve with the blood and they circulate to the different parts of the body due to the flow of the body fluids, that is of course the blood and by the lymph. So this is the main thing of the body fluids and the circulation. So the circulation is divided on the basis of the types of the body fluid. So just imagine this is the circulation. The circulation is two types on the basis of the types of the body fluid. Of course, one is called as the blood and another is called as the lymph. So now this blood, the circulation of the blood is called as the blood circulatory system. CS means circulatory system. So this is the blood circulatory system, and the circulation of the lymph is called as the lymphatic system. Lymphatic system. So now the blood circulatory system, it includes blood, of course. Next, in the blood circulatory system, a major organ is required, and that is called as the pumping organ, or you can say easily that is the heart is mostly important. And besides the blood and the heart, there is one other thing is required, that is called as the vessels. So now in our body there are the different parts, different types of the vessels. Mainly the three types of the vessels are present. One is called as the artery, another is called as the vein, and the third one is called as the capillary. So now these artery, veins, the capillary, they are called as the vessels. So these three parts, that means blood, heart and the vessels, they are included in the body circulatory system, or you can say that blood circulatory system that includes the blood, heart and the vessels. So like that, the lymphatic system, it also includes of course the lymph, and besides the lymph, the lymphatic vessel is important, and after that a lymphatic capillary is needed. So these are the different parts of the different components of the lymphatic system, and these are the different components of the blood circulatory system. So we will go to the one after one. So first we should know something about the blood circulatory system, and the first main part is the blood. So we should know detail about the blood structure, and this is very important, because in NEET obviously maximum question comes from this blood and the heart part. So let's go to the blood. So first, what is the blood? So blood is simply a connective tissue. So what does mean by the connective tissue? That means that connects any parts, for example the ligament, for example the tendon. So they are the connective tissue. So like the ligament and the tendon, the bloods are also called as the connective tissue, and because of this connective tissue, the origin of this blood is called as the mesoderm. So what is the mesoderm? Simply, if we go to the germ layer, the outer part is called as the ectoderm, the middle part is called as the mesoderm, and the inner part is called as the endoderm. So all the body parts, all the organs, obviously they will come from these parts. That means either it comes from the ectoderm, either it comes from the mesoderm, either it comes from the endoderm. So this connective tissue, or you can remember that all maximum parts that includes in the circulatory system as comes from the mesodermal origin, and this is very much important, because there are many times asked in the NEET question that the origin of the heart, the answer will be the mesoderm or the mesodermal origin. So if the color of the blood, it will ask, the color is the opaque red color is present, and the taste is the salty. The taste of the blood is the salty. So now the volume is, the volume of the total blood in our body is 5 to 6 liter, which is 6 to 8% of total body weight. Right. So this 5 to 6 liter, that means it is the 6 to 8% of our total body weight. Of course, it is in general. That means that is not mandatory. For example, in the let's imagine the man, the weight of the man is 120 kg. Now, of course, the blood volume, of course, it increases. So it normally the 6 to 8% of the total body weight. So you can calculate according to that. So this is the main volume of the blood. So now come to the function. What are the function of the blood? So the first function of the blood is the transport of nutrients. So besides the nutrients, the oxygen, the metabolic waste and the hormone are also transported through the blood. For example, the hormone, that means the pituitary. The pituitary is present in here. So now this pituitary releases the ACTH. So now the ACTH, it acts on the adrenaline. So now adrenaline is very far from the pituitary, but still it acts. Why or how? So now the pituitary, it releases the hormone ACTH to the blood, and through the blood it is transported to the ACTH to the adrenal. So now like this is metabolic waste. That means the metabolic waste, obviously every tissue they releases their waste material. So now this waste material, they are released in the kidney through the urine. So how this the waste material, for example the waste material of the lungs, from the lungs, how it goes to the kidney? By the flow of the blood. So these are the main function, that is the transport of the nutrients, oxygen, metabolic waste and the hormones. So now the second one is it regulates body pH. What is the body pH? Remember, the pH of the blood is the 7.4. This is very much important. The pH of the blood is the 7.4. And if anyone asks you that what is the pH of your body, what will you say? The answer will be the 7.4, because in any part of our body the pH is 7.4, and this pH 7.4 is maintained by the blood, because the blood pH is also 7.4. So that's why it regulates our pH, and like that it also regulates body temperature. So just imagine, let's suppose here the temperature of our body, of course it is the 37 degrees Celsius. Now in this part it is also the 37 degrees Celsius. This part is also 37 degrees Celsius. This is also 37 degrees Celsius. That means the same temperature is maintained throughout the body, and this maintenance of the same temperature throughout the body is due to this blood or the circulation of the blood. So this is the main important function of the blood. And one more important is it protects against disease. Protects against disease. That means in our body some materials is present and that fight against the pathogen. Pathogen means of course any foreign material, for example the bacteria and the virus. Let's suppose in our body any bacteria or the virus comes. So now in our body there is some material, which material will show after some time. So some material is present in our blood and they fight against these pathogens, so that it can kill these pathogens, so that we can freely survive. So that is the main function of the blood. That means it protects against the disease. So these are the main important function of the blood. So now we will go to the structure of the blood, or we will go to the structure of the blood. That means what are the exact structure of the blood. So in the blood there are the two parts of the blood. One is called as the liquid part, one is called as the solid part. So that means just imagine if you rub the water part, the water simply, so it will feel nothing. But if you rub the blood, you feel some particle inside it, and that particle is called as a solid particle. So now that is some liquid part is present, some solid part is also present. So the liquid part is called as the plasma, okay, plasma, while the solid part is called as the corpuscles. So this plasma, it is 55% of the total blood, while the solid part of the corpuscles are the 45%. Okay. So if you study the structure of the plasma, you will know that the plasma constitutes water plus proteins. So, this water is 92%, while the proteins are 6 to 8%. Okay. So, that means these proteins are dissolved in this water, and now it can call that they are the plasma. So, this is very important, proteins are present. That means just remember that there are the many proteins that are present inside our plasma, but inside our plasma there are some proteins that are present in activated form. Remember, there are many proteins are present inside our plasma or inside our blood, but there are a few proteins are present in the activated form. So, importantly, 3 proteins are present inside our plasma in the activated form. Most importantly, activated form. So, these proteins are, one is called as the fibrinogen, the second one is called as the globulin, and the third one is called as the albumin. Okay. So, these proteins are present in the activated form. So, besides these proteins, other proteins are also present inside our plasma, but these 3 proteins are present in the activated form. So, now this fibrinogen, it is also called as the coagulation factor. Coagulation factor, or simply you can call that they are the clotting factor. So, that means as the name suggests, clotting, that means the fibrinogen, it helps in the clotting or the clot of the blood. So, this is the main function of the fibrinogen. So, now come to the globulin. So, globulin, it fight against pathogen. So, these material, that is the globulin, is present in the blood or the plasma, which fight against the pathogen, or it helps in the defense mechanism inside our body. So, that is the main function of the globulin. And the albumin, it maintains the osmotic balance. What is the osmotic balance? That means the ratio of water to salt. Let us imagine the water to salt of the blood is 5:1, not exactly 5:1, I am just suppose, that means it is just an example that inside our blood the 5:1, that means the 5 parts of the water and the 1 part of the salt are present, and these proportion is maintained throughout the body or throughout the blood because of this presence of this protein, that is called as the albumin. So, these 3 proteins are present in the activated form in the plasma. Other proteins are also formed in the plasma, or they are also present in the plasma, but these proteins are present in the inactivated form, but these 3 proteins are present in the activated form. Okay. So, this is the plasma, but one word is called as the serum. What is the serum? The serum is simply the plasma minus coagulation factor. So, you can say that the serum is plasma minus fibrinogen. So, that means the serum does not contain the fibrinogen, but the plasma contains fibrinogen. That means serum contains only the globulin and the albumin, while the plasma contains fibrinogen, globulin and the albumin. So, because the fibrinogen is absent in the serum, or the clotting factor or the coagulation factor is absent in the serum, remember that the serum cannot clot, while the plasma can clot, the blood can clot, but the serum cannot clot. Why? Because in the serum the coagulation factor or the clotting factor is absent. So, that is why this is very much important that the serum cannot clot. Okay. So, this is the liquid part of this is the plasma. So, now come to the corpuscles. So, corpuscles means the solid part which includes the 45% of the total blood. So, these solid parts are the three types. One is called as the RBC or the red blood corpuscles. One is called as the WBC or the white blood corpuscles. Another is called as the platelet. Okay. So, these three parts, that means RBC, WBC and the platelets, they are called as the corpuscles or the solid part of the blood. So, now come to one of one. So, first come to the RBC or the red blood cells, sorry. So, first come to the RBC. So, the RBC is also called as the red blood corpuscles. So, this RBC is also called as the erythrocyte. Why the erythrocyte is called? The erythro means the red color, and because the RBC is the red color, that is why the RBC is also called as the erythrocyte. Okay. So, now the RBC is most abundant. Remember this point, that is the RBC is most abundant. So, that means in our blood all the corpuscles like the RBC, WBC, platelet. So, the RBC concentration or the number of the RBC is much more in comparison to WBC and the platelets. That is why the RBC is most abundant in our body or in our blood. So, the RBC formation or the site of the blood is red bone marrow. Red bone marrow. So, what is the red bone marrow? So, in our skeletal bone, let us suppose this is the skeleton bone. So, in the skeleton bone at the middle there is some materials are present, and this is called as the red bone marrow. So, this red bone marrow, it forms the blood, and this red bone, actually there are two types of the bone marrow. One is called as the white yellow bone marrow. So, the yellow bone marrow, it stores fat, but there is no link about the yellow bone marrow in the blood. So, in our body the red bone marrow, it forms the blood, and the formation of the blood is called as the hemopoiesis. Hemopoiesis. Just remember the suffix poiesis. Poiesis means the formation. What formation? That is the blood formation. So, that is why the formation of the blood, that is called as the hemopoiesis. So, now the hemopoiesis or the formation of the blood, that means it can form different types of the corpuscles. That means it can form the RBC, it can form the WBC, and it can also form the platelet. The platelet. Okay. So, the RBC or the formation of the RBC, only RBC, not the WBC and the platelet, only the formation of the RBC is called as the erythropoiesis. Erythropoiesis. So, now suffix is the poiesis, that means the formation of the RBC, the formation, and the erythro means the RBC. So, the formation of the RBC is called the erythropoiesis. So, like that the formation of the WBC is called as the leukopoiesis. Why? So, now the WBC is called as the leukocytes, the formation of the WBC is called as the leukopoiesis. Now, the platelet, the formation of the platelet is called as the thrombopoiesis. Thrombopoiesis. Why the name is thrombo? Because the platelet is also called as the thrombocyte. Okay. So, that is why the formation of the platelet is also called as the thrombopoiesis. The formation of the WBC is called as the leukopoiesis. The formation of the RBC is called as the erythropoiesis. So, now this is the erythropoiesis. and the erythropoiesis is formed in the red bone marrow, but this formation of the RBC or for erythropoiesis, one hormone is important, and that hormone is called as the erythropoietin. And this erythropoietin releases from the kidney. Remember that. That means for the erythropoiesis or the formation of the RBC, a hormone is needed, that is called the erythropoietin, and that erythropoietin is released by the kidney, but the erythropoiesis it forms in the red bone marrow. Okay. So this is the main formation of the erythropoiesis. So if we go to the lifetime or the lifespan, that is the 120 days or 4 months. So that means the RBC can live only for 120 days. So after the 120 days, it will destroy. How will it destroy or where it destroy? It destroy in the spleen. Remember that. After the 120 days, it destroy in the spleen, or it goes to the spleen, and then the spleen it destroy. So that's why the spleen is also called as the graveyard of the RBC. What is the graveyard? That means the RBC here they destroyed in the spleen, that's why it is called as the graveyard. So remember that the RBC it is formed in the red bone marrow, but it destroy, or it you can say that it dies in the spleen. That's why it is called as the graveyard of the RBC. So now if we go to the number of the RBC, the number of the RBC is 4.5 to 5.5 million per mm cube of the blood. What is the mm cube of the blood? Just imagine, let us say it is a cube, and here the length is 1 millimeter, here the breadth is 1 millimeter, same, and the width is also 1 millimeter. So if we calculate exact what is the volume of this cube, that means length into width into breadth, that means 1 into 1 into 1 mm, that means that is the 1 mm cube. So that means the volume of this cube is the mm cube. So if we fill the blood in this cube, so now we can say that this much of blood is called as the 1 mm cube. So in this 1 mm cube blood, the 4.5 to 5 million of RBC are present. Okay, 4.5 to 5.5. But sometimes the RBC it downs, or the number of the RBC it goes high. But if the number of RBC goes very down or the very low, and we can now it say that the condition is called as the anemia. That means when the number of RBC is below 4.5, then the condition is called as the anemia. But when the number of RBC is higher than 5.5, then it is called as the erythrocytosis. Erythrocytosis. So just imagine the term that is called as the cytosis. Cytosis means heavily formed or the hyperformation. So here the higher or the very high formation of the RBC is present, and the term is called as the erythropoiesis, or the erythropoiesis is also called as the polycythemia. Okay, so there the term that is the polycythemia and the erythrocyte, that means when the RBC production of the number of the RBC is higher than 5.5 million, then we can say that the condition is called as the erythrocytosis or the polycythemia, and when the number comes down or the below the 4.5 million, then we can say that the condition is called as the anemia. Okay. So the structure of the RBC, look at the structure of the RBC. So, the structure of the RBC is not like other cells. For example, here the structure is called as the biconcave shape. What is the biconcave shape of the RBC? Just look at the structure. Just imagine, let us suppose this is a cell. This is the structure of the cell. But the RBC, this part extends inward, and this part also comes inward. So, now the RBC structure is like that. Just imagine. So, look at this structure. So, this outer part they intrude inside, and this part also they intrude inside. So, that means this part is called as the concave part. Concave means look at this structure. This structure, this part we can say that this is the concave, and the blonde part or the wide part is called as the convex. Okay, and the pointed one is called as the concave. So, this structure, this structure is called as the concave. Now, this structure, these are called as also called as the concave. Now, that means two concave is present in the RBC structure. That's why it is called as the biconcave shape. Okay. So, that's why the RBC is biconcave shape, and the diameter is 7 to 8 millimeter. So, the diameter is 7 to 8 millimeter is the diameter. So, besides this, the RBC structure is not similar to the other cells. That means the RBC, it does not include, that means in the RBC there are no nucleus is absent, endoplasmic reticulum is absent, mitochondria is absent, they are also absent in the RBC. So, now imagine that how or why the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum and the mitochondria is absent in the RBC, because this nucleus, the function of the nucleus is to regulate or to control the cell. The function of the ER means the ER, the two types, one is called as the rough endoplasmic reticulum, another is called as the smooth endoplasmic reticulum. So, the rough endoplasmic reticulum, it produces the protein. The smooth endoplasmic reticulum, it produces the fat, or you can say that lipid, and the mitochondria, it produces ATP. Okay. So, imagine that in the RBC the nucleus is absent, endoplasmic reticulum is absent, mitochondria is absent. So, how the RBC get the protein, the lipid and the ATP, and how it regulates or how it controls, because in the RBC the nucleus is not present. How it is controlled, how from where it comes, it gets the protein, from where it gets the lipid, from where it gets the ATP, because for the living every cell they need this protein, lipid and the ATP, but in the RBC there is no ER, there are no mitochondria. So, how they get these materials? Now, just go to this. So, let us suppose this is the RBC structure. Okay. So, in the RBC structure, let us imagine this is a nucleus, this is the endoplasmic reticulum is present, and this is a mitochondria is present. Okay. So, now in the RBC a much more important particle, the material is present, and this material or this particle is called as the hemoglobin. Okay. So, this hemoglobin is the respiratory pigment. So, now this hemoglobin we will study detail about the hemoglobin after some time. So, this hemoglobin is the respiratory pigment, they are present inside our RBC. So, what is the function of the hemoglobin? It uptakes the oxygen. Okay. So, imagine, let us suppose this is a RBC, which is a real RBC. Inside this, there is no nucleus, no endoplasmic reticulum, no mitochondria. So, now the hemoglobins are present also this. So, now the number of the hemoglobin is very much in this part. Why? Because there is no nucleus, no endoplasmic reticulum, no mitochondria, and the now hemoglobin can reside in these places, because these places are now empty. Now, here also these hemoglobins can be placed, and because with that the number of the hemoglobin is very much increased, and because of the increment of the hemoglobin concentration, now it can uptake more and more oxygen. So, because it can uptake more oxygen, so that means the oxygen can quickly and heavily circulate to our different body parts. That means in our body, different tissues, they can get quickly and the much more amount of the oxygen. So, that means all other cells can active quickly, most importantly quickly and heavily oxygen. That means the adequate oxygen the different tissue can get, and they can also get oxygen very quickly, because there are many, but the number of the hemoglobin is very much high because of the absence of these places. That means the absence of the nucleus, mitochondria and the endoplasmic reticulum. So, that is why this is very much importance of the absence of the oxygen inside the RBC. Okay. So, now this is one part. The another part is now how it gets the ATP, how it gets the lipid, how it gets the protein. Because for the protein and the lipid, endoplasmic reticulum is required, and for the ATP, the mitochondria is also required, and the endoplasmic reticulum mitochondria is not absent. Of course, the nucleus is also not absent. So, now how they get these materials? Look at this structure. So, that means this endoplasmic reticulum is absent, but actually the RBC is formed in immature one, and this is called actually the immature one. That means once the RBC is formed, it is present like this, and this one is called the immature one, and after that it converted to the mature one, and that mature one, the endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria and the nucleus are absent, and after the maturation then only it goes to the blood and they mix in the blood. So, in the immature one, why the nucleus, the endoplasmic reticulum are present, but in the mature one that is not present, because in the immature one, the endoplasmic reticulum, it knows that it will disintegrate in the mature, but it also knows that the endoplasmic reticulum also knows that the lifespan of the RBC, most importantly, it also knows that the lifespan of the RBC is 120 days. So, that is why in the immature one, the endoplasmic reticulum, they already made the protein and the lipid for the 120 days. So, for the protein, of course, the transcription and translation is needed. The transcription occurs in the nucleus, and then the translation occurs, and after that the proteins and the lipids are formed in the immature one for the 120 days. So, after the forming the lipid and the protein, the endoplasmic reticulum they disintegrate and the nucleus is also disintegrate, because there is no function left for the endoplasmic reticulum and the nucleus in the mature one, because in the mature one the proteins and the lipids are also already present for the 120 days. So, they do not need any endoplasmic reticulum in the nucleus, and besides that, at that places the hemoglobin can also reside. So, that means the number of the hemoglobin also increased and they can uptake more and more oxygen. Okay. So, that is why in the mature one the endoplasmic reticulum and the nucleus is absent. Okay. So, one is the mitochondria. There is the mitochondria is absent, and the mitochondria helps in the formation of the ATP, and that is why it is called as the powerhouse of the cell. So, the mitochondria, actually RBC, it forms the ATP by glycolysis. Okay. So, glycolysis are the two types. One is the aerobic, another is called the anaerobic. So, aerobic means in the presence of the oxygen and the anaerobic means without oxygen. So, in the aerobic glycolysis it occurs in the mitochondria, but the anaerobic glycolysis it does not need any mitochondria. That is why the RBC, most importantly the RBC forms ATP by the glycolysis, but that glycolysis is anaerobic one, and this anaerobic one, and through the anaerobic one it forms the 2 ATP from the glucose, but in the aerobic it actually forms the 7 ATP. Of course, much less ATP are formed by the anaerobic, but it does not include any mitochondria. So, that is why the mature RBC it gets the ATP from the anaerobic glycolysis. So, that is why it does not need any mitochondria. So, that is why the mitochondria, endoplasmic reticulum and the nucleus are absent in the RBC. Okay. So, now come to this part that is called as the hemoglobin. So, what is the hemoglobin? We will go to the next slide. So, in the book sometimes it is called as the hemoglobin, and in some book it is also written as like hemoglobin. One is HAE, one is HE. So, what is the difference between the hemoglobin and the HE and the HAE? Or the do not confuse in that, because this one is called as the British English and this one is the American English. So, that means, for example, the color, the British English the color spelling is COLOUR, while in the America it is the COLOR. The America they go through according to the pronunciation of the color COLOR, but in the British the spelling is COLOUR. So, like that in the British the hemoglobin spelling is HAEMOGLOBIN, but the American English is the HEMOGLOBIN. Okay. So, this hemoglobin is called as the respiratory pigment. Respiratory pigment. What is or why it is called as the respiratory pigment? Because it traps the oxygen. So, because it can uptake or trap the oxygen or it can bind the oxygen, it is called as the respiratory pigment. Okay. So, actually there are different types of the respiratory pigment in the different organisms. For example, one is called as the obviously that is the hemoglobin, and the color of the hemoglobin is red. Why the red is present? Because the hemoglobin it has the two parts, one is called as the heme, another is called as the globin protein. Okay. So, in the heme the red color, because in heme it contains the iron or the Fe. Okay, that is why the color is the red. You can imagine that in some area the water the iron content is very much high, and in that area the color of the water is slightly reddish because of the presence of this iron. So, the color of the iron is red. So, that is why the hemoglobin color is the red. Okay. So, besides hemoglobin, other types of the respiratory pigments are also present, like hemocyanin. So, the color of the hemocyanin is blue, and they are present in the mollusca and arthropod. So, that is why the color of the mollusca and the arthropod, or the color of the blood of the mollusca and the arthropod is blue. Because if we caught the snail, a prawn, the color comes and the blood color is the blue, but in our body the color of the blood is the red color because of the presence of this hemoglobin, because the color of the blood or the color of the hemoglobin is red. That is why our blood color is red, but in the mollusca and the arthropodans the blood color is blue. So, like that another respiratory pigment is also present, that is called as the chlorocruoin, and here the color is the green, and it is present in many worms are present. So, here the color is green because of this chlorocruoin. So, now actually in the Neet previously 2 years ago it was asked that if in our body the hemoglobin is exchanged or is replaced by the hemocyanin, what will the result? That means in our body, of course, in the RBC the hemoglobin is present. If in our RBC the hemoglobin is replaced by the hemocyanin, what will the result? One result is the, of course, if we cut in our body, the blood comes and the blood color will be the blue, no, instead of the red. This is the main one. This is the one, and the main one is that the hemoglobin can bind 4 oxygen, which is much more in comparison to other 2. So, that means hemocyanin also can bind oxygen, but in a very low rate. So, that is why this hemocyanin and the hemocruoin, they are present in the invertebrates, because in the invertebrates the oxygen can circulate or oxygen can bind very slowly. So, that is why the oxygen can also goes to the different parts of the tissue, the different parts of the organ or organs in their organs in the invertebrate, they get oxygen very slowly or very after much more time. So, that is why the nature of the invertebrates are the very slothy. While in the vertebrate, in the hemoglobin, it is present in the vertebrates. That means from the Pisces, amphibian, reptiles, apes and the mammals. So, in the vertebrates, the hemoglobin can bind oxygen very quickly and much more oxygen can bind. So, that in our tissue or the tissue can get oxygen very quickly and much more amount of the oxygen can they get. So, that is why they can easily they are easily active. So, that is why the vertebrates are very active in comparison to the invertebrate one. Okay. So, that is why if we replace the hemocyanin to the hemoglobin, then our tissue cannot get the oxygen quickly, or we cannot get oxygen quickly. So, that is why our body system will be very slothy, and even we cannot survive also, because in our body in the vertebrate the complex body system is present, and this complex body system they need oxygen very quickly and the heavy amount of the oxygen they want. So, because of the hemoglobin only, the body tissue they can get oxygen quickly and heavily, but if the hemocyanin is replaced, then we cannot get oxygen quickly and heavily. So, that is why we cannot survive and we will of course die. Okay. So, these are the main difference between these respiratory pigments. So, the color of the RBC or the color of the hemoglobin is of course the red, and the RBC, actually the RBC is called as the enucleated. What is enucleated? That means E means absent and the nucleated that means every cell, actually maximum cell is the nucleated one. Look at this structure. This is called as the nucleated structure. Why? Because one nucleus is present. But in the RBC the nucleus is not present, that is why it is called as the enucleated. Okay. So, in mammal actually two organisms, so the two animals are present, and in that animals, in those animals the RBC is nucleated. These are very exceptions and they are asked in the Neet exam. One is called as the camel, another is called as the llama. So, in the camel and the llama, llama means it is also the camel family. So, this camel and the llama, here the RBC is oval, and it also contains a nucleus. So, the RBC of the camel and the llama is oval and nucleated one, while in other organisms or other animals the RBC is enucleated one and the shape is biconcave and the enucleated. For example, in human being the RBC also the biconcave and the enucleated, while the RBC of the camel and the llama are the oval and the nucleated. Okay. These two are the exceptions. So, they also contains the hemoglobin also. So, the main difference is only is the shape, that means oval, another is the presence of the nucleus. So, the respiratory pigment hemoglobin, it is present in the vertebrates only, except one, most importantly except one. That means in the invertebrate there is one class that contains the hemoglobin, and that class is called as the annelida, the annelid. It is much more important, and it is asked much more time in the Neet, that in which animal of the invertebrate contains the hemoglobin, and the answer will be the annelid. That is why if we cut earthworm, the blood comes and the color of the blood is red because of the presence of the hemoglobin. But the difference of the hemoglobin present in our body and the hemoglobin is annelid does not contain RBC, but it contains hemoglobin. What is the irony? We contains the RBC. For example, in our case, we contains RBC, and the RBC contains the hemoglobin. Okay. But in the annelid there is no RBC. That means the hemoglobin is not present in the RBC. The hemoglobin is simply present in the blood only, or the blood plasma, because in the annelid there is no RBC. That means only plasma is present, and in the plasma the hemoglobin is dissolved. So, that is why the annelid also, the hemoglobin, the oxygen also cannot get quickly, of course, quickly than other these two, but it cannot get oxygen quickly because in the RBC there is no RBC. So, that is why the hemoglobin is dissolved in the plasma only, and this is the exception. That means the annelid is the only invertebrate which contains hemoglobin, or which color is the only the red, and which is the main exception, but it does not contain the RBC. Okay. So one more important is, if you ask that what is the concentration or the amount of the hemoglobin, or the concentration of the hemoglobin, and that is the 12 to 16 gram per 100 ml of blood. This is very much important. Imagine and remember, 12 to 16 gram per 100 ml the blood is the concentration of the hemoglobin, and it will ask much more time also in the Neet exam. So the concentration of the hemoglobin is 12 to 16 gram per 100 ml of the blood. Okay. So these are the structure or detail about the RBC. Next go to the another structure that is called as the WBC. Now come to the WBC. So the WBC, it is also called as the white blood corpuscles, or it is also called as the leukocyte. Okay. So this is the RBC structure, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So these 5 structures are called as the WBC. So the WBC is much more larger than the RBC. That means the RBC is very small and the WBC is very large. So because of the large size, the number of course it is very low, because it will take much more space in the blood, and the number of the RBC is 6,000 to 8,000 per mm³ of the blood, whereas the number of the RBC is 4.5 to 5 million of the blood, while in the WBC the number comes in the ranges from 6,000 to 8,000. So that means if the blood number comes, or blood number becomes below 6,000, the condition is called as the leukopenia. Leukopenia. Look at this suffix penia. The penia means low. That means when the WBC number comes below 6,000, and the term is called the leuko. That means here the number is low for the WBC. So the number of the low number of the WBC is called as the leukopenia, while if the number is greater than 8,000, it is called as the leukocytosis. Leukocytosis. Again, just remember, that is when the number of the RBC is much more, then the term is called as the erythrocytosis. So here the number of the WBC is when it comes, or when it becomes more than 8,000, it is called as the leukocytosis. Okay. If number is less than 6,000, it is called as the leukopenia. So now look at the structure. This is one of the structure. This is the another structure. What is the difference between this structure and this structure? This structure contains a granule. That means a small particle like structure. Look at this structure. But in this structure, here is no granule. That means there is no spot like this. So on the basis of the presence or the absence of the granules, the WBC is divided. So the WBC, the white blood cell, are the two types on the basis of presence of the granules. If the granules are present, it is called as the granulocyte. If it is absent, it is called as the agranulocyte. So agranular means absence. That means here the absence of the granules are absent. So that's why here the RBC is called as the agranulocytes, but here it is called as the granulocyte. So there are the three types of the WBC that includes in the granulocyte. They are called as the neutrophil. Another is called as the basophil, another is called as the eosinophil. Okay. So, the neutrophil, basophil, eosinophil, here the name of this structure of this term comes from the dye, because the neutrophil, it is stained by neutral dye. So, here the basophil, it is stained by basic dye, and the eosinophil, it is stained by acidic dye. Okay. So, on the basis of the dye, the term of this structure or the term is coined, that is the neutrophil, basophil, eosinophil. So, in the neutrophil, the nucleus is 5 to 7 lobed structure. Look at this structure, this is the neutrophil structure, and the blue color is called as the nucleus, this is the nucleus. So, look at this structure, here the nucleus is one lobe, this is the second lobe, this is the third lobe, this is the fourth lobe, this is the fifth lobe. So, here the nucleus varied from the 5 to 7, that means much more lobed, or the nucleus is present in the much more lobed structure. So, that is why the neutrophil is also called as the polymorphonuclear structure. Poly means many, morpho means of course the morphology, and the nuclear means the nucleus, because here the morphology of the nucleus is like the much more lobed structure. So, that is why a very hard term, that is called the polymorphonuclear structure, that is the other name of the neutrophil. Okay. So, in the basophil, the lobe is 2 to 3. So, look at this structure, this is the basophil structure, this is the structure, and here the lobe is either 2 or the 3, and here the shape is S shape, like this. So, here the nucleus is S shape and the lobe is 2 to 3, while the eosinophil is the 2 lobed, or it is called as the bilobed structure. Look at this structure, this is the eosin, one is one lobe, another lobe. So, that means the 2 lobes, so the bilobed are present, and the eosinophil is also called as the bilobed. So, if we look the concentration, the total concentration of the neutrophil is 60 to 65% of the total WBC. That means, in the WBC, much more, the most abundant WBC is the neutrophil, which includes the 60 to 65% of the total WBC, while in the basophil it only 0 to 5%, while the eosinophil it is 2 to 3% of the total WBC. Okay. So, this is the concentration. Now, come to what are the function of this neutrophil, basophil and the eosinophil. So, the neutrophil helps in the phagocyte. What is the phagocyte? Just imagine the amoeba. In the amoeba, they are called as the pseudopodia. Let us suppose a food is entered here. So, now these pseudopodia, they engulf this food. So, now this structure is called the engulfing of the food, or the ciliary mode of the food. So, like that the phagocyte, that means the neutrophil also helps in the phagocyte. That means, let us suppose this is a body of vertebrate animal, any vertebrate animal. Let us suppose a pathogen enters, that means, let us suppose this is a bacteria comes. So, now in the blood a neutrophil is present. So, now this neutrophil, it engulfs this structure, and after engulfing this structure it destroys this bacteria. That is called like the fight against the pathogen. That means, any pathogen enters, it engulfs it and kills by entering itself in its body. So, that is called the phagocyte. Okay. One is called the basophil. What is the function of the basophil? Basophil helps in the detoxification, and another most important is it helps in the immune system. What is the immune system? It actually helps in the allergic reaction. Allergic reaction means when we encounter a pollen grain or the any pollen or dust. So here some mammals or some humans, they are allergic to the pollens or they are allergic to the dust, like the asthma. So here also the allergic reactions are also formed. So that's why during the allergic reaction, or you can say that during the asthma, the number of the basophils are very much high, or the number of the basophil is increased during the allergic reaction, because this basophil helps in the immune system. Okay. So this is the function of the basophil, and the eosinophil, that means it helps in the inflammation. It promotes the inflammation. So besides the inflammation, it also helps in the immune system, like the basophil immune system. But how? So this eosinophil, it releases heparin. What is heparin? Heparin is anticoagulant. Anticoagulant means anti-clotting factor. That means, let us imagine in our body, obviously the blood is in the liquid form, not in the solid form. But once after any cut, the blood comes out, and after that it gets clot. Wow! Because of the absence of the heparin in our outside our body. That means inside our body the heparin is present, and because of the presence of the heparin, the blood cannot clot inside our body. But when it comes to the outside, and here there is no heparin, so that's why they clot, because of the clotting factor, of course. But inside our body the blood cannot clot because of the presence of the heparin. Okay. So this is the synonym of the hirudin. And this hirudin, actually it is present in the normally annelid, not actually hirudinia. The hirudinia, that is a class of the phylum annelid. So here in the annelid, that means in the hirudinia, so they also contain a hirudin, which is exactly same like the heparin. That means in the hirudinia, the blood cannot clot also inside our body, inside their body, because they also contain the hirudin, that is the anticoagulant for them. So we contain the heparin, which is anticoagulant to the our blood. So that's why in our structure, in our body, the blood cannot clot. Okay. One is the eosinophil, it releases heparin. So besides the heparin, it also releases the serotonin and histamine. So this serotonin and the histamine, they also helps in the immune system. So that's why the eosinophil also helps in the immune system. Okay. So now come to the agranulocyte. What is the agranulocyte? That means here the granules are absent. That means there is no granules. So here the two types of the agranulocyte are present. One is called as the monocyte. Another is called as the lymphocyte. Okay, this is the monocyte structure. Remember that the monocyte is the largest WBC. That means the size of the WBC, or the size of the monocyte, is much more large in comparison to the other WBC. Of course, the WBC are also large. That means in the among WBC, RBC and the platelet, the size of the WBC are much more larger, and among the WBC, the size of the monocyte is largest. Okay. So what is the function of the monocyte? The monocyte function is also the phagocyte. So you can ask that what is the phagocyte? That means Here I told that the neutrophil has also the phagocyte character. So now the monocyte has also the phagocyte character, that means it can also engulf the foreign particle. So what is the difference between the phagocyte of the neutrophil and the monocyte? Let's suppose now again this is a animal of the any vertebrate. So now the pathogen comes. So in the blood the neutrophil is present and now it engulfs it and it destroys this structure. So let us suppose this is an organ or the tissue, let us suppose this is a liver tissue. Okay. So sometimes much more pathogens comes to the in our body. So sometimes some pathogens escape from the neutrophil and it protrudes to the liver. So now when it goes to the tissue, now the monocyte neutrophil cannot interact. Why? Because in our system our circulatory system is the closed circulatory system. We will know after some time what is the open circulatory system, that is the closed circulatory system. Briefly, in the open circulatory system, that means there is no vessels, that means all the tissues, all the cells are in direct contact with the blood. But in the closed circulatory system, the blood flows through the vessels, and because of that blood of the tissue or the any cells, they cannot interact directly to the blood, or they are not contacted directly to the blood, or that means the any material or the like the oxygen and the carbon dioxide, they are transported through the capillary. That means the blood is not directly contact in the closed circulatory system. So that means now here the blood cannot interact with the tissue. So because of that the neutrophil cannot interact in this tissue. Now when this pathogen is entered to the liver, how this pathogen is engulfed? Here another tissue is another structure is present, which is meant to again phagocyte only in the tissue, and that structure is called as the macrophage. So now you will ask that what is the now macrophage? So I am telling that the monocyte and the neutrophil, now another term comes, that is the macrophage. What is the macrophage in between the monocyte and the neutrophil? So actually in different organs different types of the macrophages are present. For example, in the liver the macrophage is called as the Kupffer cell. The Kupffer cell, it is the macrophage. For example, the lungs, in the lungs the macrophage is the macroglia. That means it is also a macrophage. That means in different organs different macrophages are present, which is same structure, same function like the neutrophil. That means they also engulf if any parasites or any pathogens comes into this tissue. So now these macrophages actually they are formed, or they are the monocytes. That means when the bloods or the WBC are present or are released, so the monocyte, so they entered into the tissue, and in the tissue it forms the macrophage. So actually the macrophages are the monocyte, but it is the blood part because it is originated in the blood. In the blood they enter to the tissue and it forms the macrophages. So what we studied about the Kupffer cell or the macroglia or the macrophage of the tissues, they are actually the monocytes. So that is also the phagocyte. That means the monocyte is the phagocytic in the tissue, while the neutrophil is the phagocytic character in the blood. Okay. So this is the monocyte, and one is the lymphocyte. The lymphocyte, it releases B lymphocyte. Another is called as the T lymphocyte. Okay. So the B lymphocyte and the T lymphocyte, it actually the B lymphocyte, it forms the antibody. You will know up in the immune system, it forms the antibody, and the T lymphocyte, it helps in the formation of the antibody. So that means it also helps in the immune system. Okay. So and one more thing, that in the monocyte, look at this structure here, the nucleus is kidney shape, kidney, or you can say that it is the bean shape. So this is a bean shape or the kidney shape of the nucleus is present, while in the lymphocyte the nucleus is round and large. Look at this structure, this is the lymphocyte structure, and here the nucleus is round and the large. So this is the different structure and the detailed structure of the WBC. Now we can say that what is the one common thing of this WBC. That means what is the common thing between the neutrophil, basophil, eosinophil, monocyte and the lymphocyte. So the common thing is that they all helps in the immune system. So that's why the function of the WBC is mostly the immune system. That means to fight against pathogen. There are the different types of the processes. That means one can fight by the phagocyte, one can fight by forming the allergy, one can fight by the immune system, one can fight by forming the antibody, one can fight by forming or by helping the antibody. So there are the different types of the ways of the to counter the pathogens, but they all include the immune system. That's why the function of the WBC is immune system, the defense system, or to counter to the pathogens, while the function of the RBC is to uptake the oxygen. That is the main function of the RBC, and the main function of the WBC is to fight against pathogen of the immune system. So this is the WBC structure. Now come to a third corpuscles, that is called as the platelet. Platelets are also called as the thrombocyte. Okay, this platelet, that means what is the function of the platelet? They helps in the clotting. That's why the platelet is also called as the clotting factor, or they are also called as the coagulant factor. Okay, and remember that the platelet are all only present in the mammals. They are not present in all the vertebrates. They are only present in the mammals. That's why you have also remember that if we dressing the feces, so the blood doesn't clot. Why? Because in the feces the clotting factor of the platelet is absent. The clotting factor is present only in the mammals. So that's why that means including we, in our body the blood clot because of the presence of the platelet, because the mammal contain platelet, but other vertebrates they does not include any clotting factor. So only the mammals. So the structure of the platelet is enucleated like the RBC, but the structure is biconvex structure. What is the biconvex structure? So look at this RBC structure. RBC structure was like this. Here the outer part was intruded inside it, but the structure of the platelet is like this. That means the outer part are extruded to the outside. That means this structure is called as the convex, or this is another convex. So that's why it is called as the biconvex structure, while the RBC is biconcave structure. Or this biconvex, we can say that this is a like lens structure. Look at the lens, the structure of the lens like this also. So that's why the lens is also the biconvex. So that's why the structure of the platelet is enucleated. That means nucleus is absent and the biconvex structure is present. So now the site of the platelet or the formation of the platelet is red bone marrow. Red bone marrow. Actually, the red bone marrow, it forms a large structure, and that is called as the megakaryocyte. Okay. So now this megakaryocyte is the large structure. They are divided into simply teeny parts. So these teeny parts are called as the platelets. Okay, from the megakaryocyte. So the megakaryocyte actually it is a complete cell, but the platelet are not complete cell. The complete cell actually the RBC and the WBC. RBC of course with some exceptions, but the RBC is also a cell. WBC is also a cell, but the platelet is not a cell, but the megakaryocyte is a cell. From the megakaryocyte the platelets are formed. Okay. So if we go to the number ranges from 1.5 lakh to 3.5 lakh per microliter of blood. So when the blood is below 1.5 lakh, the condition is called as the thrombopenia. Again same suffix penia. If the number is higher than 3.5 lakh, the term is called as the thrombocytosis. Okay. So from this term, that means the cytosis and the penia, you can also imagine the number of the platelet. So now the lifespan of the platelet is 8 to 12 days. Okay. So after 8 to 12 days, it destroys in the liver and spleen. So that means platelets are formed in the red bone marrow and it destroys in the liver and the spleen after 8 to 12 days. Now remember the RBC. The RBC was also formed in the red bone marrow, but it was destroyed in the spleen only. But the platelet they destroy in the liver as well as spleen. This is the main difference between the, that's why the spleen is called as the graveyard of the RBC only, but not liver. But the platelet they die in the liver and the spleen. So these are the different types of the structure of the corpuscles. That means these are the platelet, WBC and the RBC structure. So after next class we will study about the different types of the circulatory system. So if you like the video, please like and subscribe my video. Thank you.